Great question. Were Jesus and Mary Magdalene married? And let's take it a step further. Did they have kids? Now, I know a lot of believers hate this question, but I think it's a really great question, especially for folks who don't come from a believer's perspective or for folks who are going through a deconstruction period in their lives and just consuming everything they can. And there's a lot of garbage out there. So, is there any evidence that Jesus and Mary were married and they had kids? Well, in the first century, it was indeed common for Jewish teachers and rabbis to be married. Marriage and having children were highly valued in Jewish culture, and the Jewish historian Josephus mentions several Jewish teachers and leaders from that period who were known to be married. But just because it was common does not mean that it was required. It's known that numerous Jewish sects practiced celibacy. John the Baptist was likely celibate, living by himself in the wilderness, eating locusts and honey. And we know Paul was celibate as well. And he was known as a Pharisee among Pharisees and was taught by the great Jewish teacher Gamaliel. So being a teacher and not having a wife wasn't frowned on, and it wasn't peculiar. And obviously there's no indication in the 4 canonical Gospels that Jesus and Mary are together. So some point to extra biblical works such as the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, and some other Gnostic works as holding clues to a deeper relationship between Jesus and Mary. And the Gospel of Thomas does contain some sayings that have been interpreted by some as hinting at a special relationship between the two, but it doesn't directly suggest a marital relationship between Jesus and Mary. One of these sayings aggressively has Peter stating, "Let Mary leave us, for women are not worthy of life." And Jesus responds by saying, "I myself shall lead her in order to make her male, so that she too may become a living spirit, resembling you males. For every woman who will make herself male will enter the kingdom of heaven." Yeah, the Gospel of Thomas has some stuff in it. And this saying has been interpreted in various ways by different scholars. Some see it as a reflection of gender dynamics at the time, with Jesus advocating for the spiritual equality of women. Others see it as suggesting a special role for Mary Magdalene in the early Christian community. However, there is zero consensus among scholars about the absolute meaning of that saying, and it doesn't directly suggest a romantic or marital relationship between Jesus and Mary. Another work that theorists bring up is the Gospel of Mary. Consensus dating puts this gospel firmly in the 2nd century and presents Mary as a trusted disciple of Jesus who receives special teachings and shares them with the disciples, which actually leads to a lot of tension between her and the fellows, particularly Peter. This too has led to some speculation that Mary and Jesus had a special relationship, even a romantic one. But again, the text does not say that. If we read that into it, it's because we are bringing that into the text. Now, it's notable that the Gospel of Mary is only partially preserved, and it's possible that the original text contained more information about the relationship between Jesus and Mary, but as it stands, it does not provide any clear evidence that they were involved or that they were married. There's the Gospel of Philip, a Gnostic text from the 3rd century, which contains a passage that mentions Jesus kissing Mary, with the disciples saying, "Why do you love her more than all of us?" But the text is damaged and there are missing words. It's not entirely clear from the context what kind of kiss is being described, as kissing was a common form of greeting in the ancient world. But of course, this passage has often been interpreted as suggesting an intimate relationship between Jesus and Mary. But again, that interpretation is purely speculative and is not widely accepted by scholars. We're looking at a 3rd century Gnostic work here, which is a whole other thing. Facts are, there are no ancient texts or historical evidence that definitively state that Jesus and Mary were romantically linked. Doesn't exist. Anything out there otherwise is purely circumstantial. And for the most part, throughout Christian history, this idea just wasn't really a thing for most people. Most of the modern idea of Jesus and Mary being romantically linked comes from that good old classic, The Da Vinci Code, which is a fun piece of fiction and should be regarded as such. But as controversial as it sounds, Dan Brown didn't come up with the ideas in his book. He actually ripped off my favorite conspiracy classic from the 1980s, Holy Blood, Holy Grail. And that book is a lot of fun if you like conspiracy mumbo jumbo, because boy, it takes you for a ride. In Holy Blood and Holy Grail, the authors propose a theory that Jesus and Mary were married and had kids that moved to what would become the Languedoc region of France. There, they intermarried with noble families that later formed the Merovingian dynasty, which, according to a secret society called the Priory of Sion, has a claim to the French throne. And it claims that the church tried to kill off that bloodline and its guardians, Cathars and the Templars, so that popes could hold the episcopal throne. And the authors suggest that the famed Holy Grail represents both the womb of Mary Magdalene and the sacred royal bloodline that she initiated. And this also involves a mysterious church in France filled with riddles and codes called René le Chateau, which is the center of rather sensational claims involving the Blanche of Castile, the Merovingians, the Knights Templar, Cathars, the treasures of Solomon's Temple, looted by the Visigoths no less, including the Ark of the Covenant and the seven-branched menorah, the Priory of Sion, the Rex Deus, ley lines, sacred geometry, the remains of Jesus, the head of John the Baptist, the Freemasons, and a whole lot more. If you can believe it. It's like a smorgasbord soup of all your favorite conspiracy theories with just a touch of wow. Yeah, the book reads like this, and legitimate scholars and historians ravaged it for good reason. It's a fun dive into alternate history, but has no basis in real fact. So, back to the original question. Were Jesus and Mary married, and did they have kids? All real historical evidence points to absolutely not. And the idea that Mary was Jesus' wife, much like the attempt to paint Mary as a harlot, I believe actually diminishes who Mary really was, diminishing her role as a woman who had suffered but who had been healed, a woman who had followed Jesus, financially supported Jesus, never abandoned Jesus even at the cross, and was there to anoint his mangled, broken body, and diminishes her role as the first preacher of the good news that Christ is risen. So, if you're interested in going deeper on Mary and other powerful women in early Christian history, I'm doing a new 2-hour live workshop on Thursday, October 12th at 7 p.m. Eastern, called by God, Women Leaders in the Early Christian Faith, where we're going to dive deep on the women of the early Christian faith. Ladies like Lydia, Eunia, Phoebe, Priscilla, Thecla, Amma Syncletica, Sarah, Theodora, Perpetua, Fatini, Egeria, and many, many, many more. We'll discuss who these amazing women were, their inspirational impact on the culture at the time, their importance overall, and then we'll discuss some reasons why we don't know enough about them today and why their voices are needed, especially now. Afterwards, we'll do some Q&A, and for those registered, if you miss it, there will be a download link sent afterwards. To register, follow my profile linky-dinky-doo, sign on up, and as space is limited, registration is done on a donation-only basis, with all proceeds going to our overseas charity and mission work, details of which you can find right there. I look forward to seeing you Thursday, October 12th at 7 p.m. Eastern, and if you like stuff like this and you aren't already a part of our community here, give us a follow. God bless.